Hello, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of In Our Time. Happy Mashramani. We have a very exciting program ahead of us. We have none other than the Prime Ministerial candidate of the coalition, the APNU AFC, that is Mr. Moses Nagamutu, and we have lots of questions for him. Also, we have some of our panel members from last week. We have Narissa, and we also have Janessa, and none other than James Bond. You all know him. So let's get right into our discussion. You pick up the papers, you look at the news, it's all over. The coalition, what is it about? What are they going to do for us? Everybody's feeling optimistic about May 11th. So let's get right into our discussion. One of the questions I wanted to ask Mr. Nagamoto, you were there. It's history. I think it's only twice in our history we've had a coalition of this nature in our politics. Two were post-election. I think this is the only pre-election. And so I wanted to know what was the moment like when the AFC and when you yourself knew that we were going to do this thing. We were going to come together.
Well, you describe it yourself. You said it as historic. So I believe, having been in party politics for 53 years now, that one sees this as a culmination of a very long process of trying to search to find a viable political union. And I believe that it has eluded us in a major way since 1955, when there was a split in what had afterward become the GPP and the PNC. And I have lived through a process where constantly there had been efforts by Shedi Jagan to reunite with Forbes Burnham. And it was Shedi Jagan's obsession that he would one day merge the PPP and the PNC. And in a strange way, I've been in the center of that, because there were occasions when I would have to be used discreetly to take messages to Mr. Burnham of a possible meeting between Shedi Jagan and himself. And even just today I read in the newspaper where someone reminded me in a letter that in the 80s I actually was alone in a battle fighting for this conversation between Shedi and Burnham, and those were the last efforts when we had secret talks before Mr. Forbes Burnham died. Those talks were ongoing, but they died with him. So in a sense, when I saw the dialogue between AFC and APNU, it brings back those memories that we haven't totally lost what we strove for in the past. We simply resurrected the longing, we resurrected the need, and perhaps the urgency that we should have national unity now, because our country is in danger. We're in danger of a dwindling minority that is corrupt, that is arrogant, and that has plundered the resources of this country, both financial and natural. And you need to have a rescue team. And I see the AFC and APNU combination as a coming together, not only as a fulfillment of history, that you could have a unity of this sort, but also as producing an effective team to take this country back from the verge of destruction.
Excellent. Another question I wanted to ask is, I know on the side of the AFC, you had some people who were a little disgruntled about the union. Some things might have been said in the past about merging. What do you say to those people who might feel it might not have been the best thing?
Well, I can only say that it would have been worse either way. If you had the PPP re-elected under Ramotar for another term, you would have had a reduced minority government. The PPP would probably have come in with 35% of the vote in a three-way race. And 65% of this population would have been locked out, excluded from any say in the governance of the country. It is, in the first place, a violation and betrayal of the Constitution of Guyana, that you have no inclusion of a large number of persons. And on the other hand, if you re-elect Ramotar with a 35% government, you place this country at risk of having perhaps an escalation of the political crisis, an escalation of the constitutional crisis, an implosion among our people who cannot accept that 35% or 36% of can take 100% of the power. This is a multi-ethnic society. This is a country where you have two strong and perhaps equally matched minorities, Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese, but we're all Guyanese. And we have Amerindians, Chinese, Portuguese, and mixed people. We feel that there is almost a natural right of all of us to be included in the processes of governance. And those of you who are out there who feel that there's something you will lose, no. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to lose. We have decided on coming into this union because the alternative is going to be disastrous for Guyana. More instability means more of you leaving Guyana. More instability means more crime. More instability means more frustration and suicide. We have had enough of all the disasters, our unfair share of it. And therefore, we believe that you need to put your confidence in this new process of forging multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-party unity. Guyana needs it. Without that, Guyana dies. And so I want to tell you that you have to look your children in the eyes on election day and tell yourself you're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this for them, because the future belongs to the young people, our children, our grandchildren. And therefore, I believe that those people who are fearful, they are harking back to the fears that have been implanted in us by the colonials. It was the colonial powers that divided us in order to rule us. And if we employ the tools of the colonialists to continue to divide our people, we are no better than the colonialists. Those today who are preaching racism, and I will be very blunt in this, because I go down at the bottom, the PPP has gone in a very negative, a very backward, very reactionary way to talk about AFC selling out to the black man. We find this very repulsive. Our Constitution forbids the advocacy of racism. Our laws says you can't use race hate in your language, hate speeches. But yet you find it goes on unabated, because the PPP knows right now that under Jagdeo and Ramotar, they have alienated the Indian support that the party had enjoyed. They have alienated the best leaders of the party. They have alienated the sugar workers and almost destroyed the sugar industry. They are running the rice industry in such a way that it hurts rice farmers who cannot get paid for their own paddy, and they're not getting the price they deserve. They have done enough to antagonize fishermen who are plundered and attacked by pirates. There is no protection of the Indo-Guyanese base in Berbice and Essequibo and Elsie against banditry. Mr. Clement Rohi and the PPP sat there on their hands and cannot offer security and protection to the Guyanese people.
Which brings me to my
And therefore, there is no need. So why should their people be fearful of something that is new, something that is dynamic, something that is going to bring protection, something that is going to bring prosperity to the country?
I know the campaign gets underway on March 4th. I wanted to ask you, what are some of the programs that you're going to be rolling out and engaging the population? I know you've already started to preempt some of that. What are some of the programs we are going to be hearing about?
All right. Now, the first thing that you need to deal with in Guyana is that you need a complete overhaul of the economic policies of the country. It lacks vision, it lacks planning. We see the laissez-faire, ad hoc, what I call fly-by-night projects being sold as macro projects, and we don't see how all of this will benefit Guyanese. We need to look at how to create jobs. And so the alliance or the coalition is going to roll out a plan, a 100-day plan to create jobs, to put our young people to work, to make them feel that this country belongs to them all, that their alternative is not escapism, running out of Guyana, or going into drugs, alcohol, or prostitution. We need to have these plans rolled out that will make the economy work. The specific of those plans will come out into our joint manifesto, the coalition's manifesto, and details would be discussed as we go along. But for me, the first thing is to be able to put the economy on a sound footing, because I don't see this adhocracy helping anyone. The government can say, oh, we went to Jamaica and we saw a Chinese or a group of Chinese with a suitcase of money, and we decided to take a loan to build what? A new airport. They haven't studied whether you needed a new airport. Yes, we need a new extended airstrip, the tarmac, but certainly not a new airport. And that's their justification for having that. Oh, they just felt they needed a hospital for tourism. People are going to leave first world countries to come here to have body parts. And so they put down some money, sign on to a loan, and before you know, the man Surendra gone with $900 million, and not even a block was put to build this hospital. These are fly-by-night ideas. 4-lane roads here, 4-lane roads there. Since the last elections, and the 4 lanes are going nowhere. We seem to be having more congestion because they don't know how the 4 lanes were supposed to merge into easing the traffic congestions and creating better facilities for commuters. So we don't need these fly-by-night adhocracy. We need sound programs that are going to create jobs that will ease the social problems of our people, and at the same time would stimulate production. The emphasis has to be on the productive sector.
Excellent.
I call him Uncle Moses, and been to his home a couple of times as well. Uncle Moses, I think you can remember when I came and visited you just after you resigned the PPP, and you were having your mutton curry, and we spoke then.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
We spoke then about the same coalition, the idea of coalition. I want to really find out your heart, because having studied together, I know you firsthand, you're a working class man. Working classes in the sense that you look out for the ordinary man above all things. I know that firsthand. But to young people, how much of an investment, how much of a buy-in is you're going to use your influence and power to ensure that young people come on board this coalition, not just as window dressers. Young people need an opportunity to be a part of this coalition, to feel as if this is theirs. That is the only way you'll get their support.
Yeah.
If they feel, well, you know something, this is about me. At the end of the day, I don't want to say specifically, but what is your vision for young people out there who want to know, there's a new coalition, but I mean, what does that burst my bubble, but how do you make it attractive to them? using your influence, using your office to
Well,
that end.
well, you didn't only come into my house, but remember we were in school
So we were-
together.
we went to school together, yes.
It's a
yes,
great
indeed.
experience for
Yes.
a grandfather with almost a little boy in diaper. We're in law school together.
Yes, yes.
So we shared time in Trinidad, and we even socialized. But the issue, James, is that it perhaps would do me good to recount very quickly and very briefly that I grew up as a young boy in the Lutheran Church. I became one of the fiercest debaters in the Luther League. And many years after, I debated against Corbyn and I think Jonas in the Patrick Dargan debate. Well, don't ask who won. And so my grounding has been among young people. And then I started to teach when I was hardly 16. I was teaching in a high school, so my students were even older than I was. Then I founded a high school in West Berbice, lived there for a while, and came down to Georgetown. But the question is, when I came to Georgetown, I joined the Progressive Youth Organization. I was in the PYO, and very quickly, I became head of the student movement that was aligned to the PYO, and eventually the vice chairman of the PYO. So I have a lot of experience working with young people. And as a young person growing up, I shared some of the ideals of youth. And those ideals have never escaped me. And growing up, people would refer to me as the Guyana Che Guevara, because I embrace some radical and yet very liberal concept. So for me, relating to youth issues, gender issues, sexual orientation, youth obsession about a secure place in society, I believe is that these are some of the things that I, being older now, I still can bring into the new house, our common house, the house that I will refer to as the Alliance Home or the Unity Home, but it is a house that tells young people that we want you to be patriotic. We want you to love your country. We want you to be committed to your country. We want you to know that there are leaders in this new movement who realize that you have been alienated, you have been chased out, you have been left on the street corners, to say that. So that there is a investment in young people. James is one of the young leaders in the parliament. I've seen many young leaders in the parliament, even on the side of the Alliance for Change. Trevor Williams is head of the Youth for Change, and he is a member of parliament, a very young person. So, yes, in this new coalition, the idea is that this is a transition movement. This movement has an enormous job, more than winning an election. It has an enormous job to attract young people, to let them know that this is your platform, that the leaders that you may see here today are the ones who are there to just hand you over the baton. You got to run with it. We're going to hand you the torch. You have to take it and keep the flame alive. And so I see in David Granger, who has come out of the army, where there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of demand for training, for commitment, for bravery, for the characteristics that youth find appealing. Why do you think so many young people join the army, or they join youth movement that would want to go and volunteer among other peoples in rural areas and so in different countries? Is because young people are by nature adventurous. Young people are by nature attuned to doing things that conservative older people don't want to do. So that when you see a David Granger who has come out of the National Service, who had experience of doing innovative things, have an experience of creating skills for young people. I've been to Tumatumari, I've been to Conawaruk, I've seen some of the camps that were there before, National Service camps, and young people were provided vocational training that they could have used skills, which is badly needed, because in Guyana today, we don't find people going to school to do welding, plumbing. If they did, they don't have any encouragement that you should create small factories to employ them there. So young people will have to come on board now. They can't say, we'll wait to see how things go. They can't wait to see May 11 and hope to see the result and then they will come on board. They are the driving force of change. They're 65% of the electorate. And if you don't do it, no one else will do it for you. We're just the transition leader. And I'm there to work side by side with Brigadier General Retired David Granger, with my team, and we are there to be able to open the way. Proverbially, I'm the Moses. Perhaps I'm only going to see the promised land. Maybe I won't enter it. But at least I know, I have an idea what that promised land is all about. And that promised land is a promised land that we must give to our young people.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for that kind introduction. Minister of Education, Acting, and Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education, Principal of the Sherwood Parker College of Education and Vice Principal, Chief Education Officer, Chief Planning Officer, Ministry of Education, Chairman of the Board of the Sherwood Parker College of Education, President of the Guyana Teachers Union, members of staff of the Sherwood Parker College of Education, and most of all, the graduates today, all 862 of you, relatives and friends, of course, the police band, MS, the Guyana Police Band, unless they have a medal of service, you know. Members of the media, today I'm very honored to have been invited by the Sherwood Parker College of Education to address you, and I'm happy to have accepted. Let me start by wishing all of you a happy Christmas. This is the best Christmas present you can get, I'm sure. Graduates, Guyana has changed significantly since Robert Cyril Gladstone Potter graduated with a Class 1 Teacher's Certificate from the Mico Training College in Jamaica. The Mico College is the oldest and most prestigious teacher training college in the entire Western Hemisphere, and Cyril Potter was one of the most outstanding graduates of that class in 1920. Cyril Potter excelled in his studies in sports at the Mico College, just as he had done at Queen's College, where he won several academic prizes and was a first-class athlete, first-class cricketer, first-class footballer. Cyril Potter returned home to teach at his alma mater and elsewhere. He was later appointed principal of the Government Training College for Teachers, which was renamed the Cyril Potter College of Education in 1976, the 100th anniversary of compulsory primary education in Guyana. Cyril Potter was a patriot. He was talented. He was versatile. He composed the music for Guyana's national anthem, He composed all the patriotic songs, My Guyana El Dorado, A Song of Hope, and Way Down Demerara. It would be difficult to find a more worthy person in whose honor the Teachers Training College could have been named. Cyril Potter would have sat, like you, as a young graduate at the Teachers College 92 years ago, dressed in these medieval gowns, which some of you never wore before, and you probably will never wear again. Cyril Potter, like you, was participating in an ancient academic rite of passage. This quaint garb that you're wearing, this elaborate convocation, these fancy certificates, this happy assembly of family, of friends, of dignitaries, they are all not an annual amusement. They are serious matters. They signify public recognition of your assumption of wider responsibility. They signify your transition to a higher level of authority. They signify your acceptance of a heavier burden of duty. This ceremony is also a celebration of your accession to membership of an elite educational club. It represents the completion of a regime of rigorous study. It marks your declaration of the aspiration to accomplish the mission of this institution, which is to provide a formal education system with academically qualified and professionally trained teachers at the nursery, primary, and secondary levels. Guyana today is a country of bright prospects.
This is our time.
I'll give our ladies a chance to jump into discussion.
My question, we have many young persons right now who are not too enthusiastic about voting, because as far as they're concerned is that even if the APNU and the AFC, the coalition wins, nothing will change for them. What can you tell them today? What can you say to encourage them to help to change their mind?
The years of neglect of young people have created a blur in their vision. If they have been bludgeoned for such a long time, James and I were lawyers, and the first thing I noticed going to court, the first case probably I was doing at Leonora, a young man was found with a little piece, I think they said it was a pen, and they considered it, the police considered it a smoking utensil. And I jumped up and I said, I'm going to defend this young person. And the magistrate told me, no, you don't do it this way. So I said, well, what way do you do this? And so I was more concerned that this young man was going to be sentenced to 1 year in jail for something that I saw it looks like a pen, because he can't defend himself. Now, I'm using this that had I not intervened and talk about community service and the need to reform young people, then what is the alternative? Is to go to jail. So I'm in court and I'm seeing every day young people going to jail because they have a piece of weed or something, because the laws are not implemented in such a way that it sees young people as an object of reformation, an object of rehabilitation. They see them as object of condemnation and destruction. So we send them to jail and we make them worse than they come out. Our laws would provide, the Section 71, I believe, of our Narcotics Act, provide that even when you sentence someone for a small quantity of the herb, that you monitor the rehabilitation process, and if you're satisfied with the medical certificate that person is rehabilitated, then the sentence is commuted. But none of that is happening in Guyana. So I'm giving that as an example where the society has come down very harshly on young people. And that's why you find so many of them are on the other side of the law. So they are rebelling. They feel that nobody understands their dilemma. Nobody understands their frustration due from not having a job, and if they do have a job, the job cannot pay to give them a comfortable life. They're underemployed. They're walking about the street asking people for work, but they don't have the skills that will put them into a job which may be available. So we need to tell young people who are in this state of hopelessness that you don't put yourself beyond the pale, outside the boundary. You come inside the boundary if you want to play. If you want to bowl, if you want to bat, if you want to field, you have to be within the boundary and not outside of it. So this political arena is offering you an opportunity to change the game, to be a winner, to be a player. And voting for the coalition, voting for APNU, AFC, for the PAM, and the key. You're getting two now. You're getting a PAM, and we're giving you the key to open your own future. It's in your own hand. It's in your own hand. You're the ones who are going to become the agent for change. So don't be consumed by your frustration and sense of hopelessness. Convert that into action and purposefulness. Excellent.
Okay, being a part of the education system, I'd like to know what are your plans or your party's plans on helping us?
Well, the education sector is pivotal to transformation. You realize that today it's such a national disgrace that our young people should have been arguing and debating and competing as to the type and standard and quality of education, the content of it, whether we should have more IT, whether we should have more scientific input into our learning, more language, habla español, whether we should be speaking more Spanish, Portuguese, and because we need to interact with our neighbors. But today they're consumed as to whether the University of Guyana has a toilet, or sufficient toilets, or adequate seating facilities. It is primitive to want to talk about pushing our country forward if our people, young people in university, in colleges, are just battling daily against awful backward conditions. Now, the education system has to start from the bottom. You have to start with your community. As an old teacher, my wife was a lecturer at Teacher Training College where you graduated, and she's now retired. You have to start at the bottom to ensure that your community workers go house to house to find out how many people have their kids still at home. I've known of parents who can't afford to send their children to school, or they are working and they have to use the older child to look after the baby. And this is kept under the carpet. So first, if you want to boast about an education system, you have to make sure that you have universal nursery and primary education, that young mothers are liberated so that they can go out and don't have to stay home to look after a baby, that you have creche to take care of them so that women, young women in particular, are not stultified. Their ability is not thwarted. They may want to go to a school. They may want to further their education, but because they have a child, they have to stay home. This is not the age where you rely on granny to take care of your babies. You have to do it yourself. You need to also, so that level, to go right up into secondary school, primary, secondary school, we have to make sure that we have not elitist education, where only those who have money to send their children to a high school or to private lessons are the ones that are coming out at the top of the grade. You have to make sure that the quality of education is egalitarian. The spread is even. And how do you have an even spread of education? You have to pay your teachers more. You have to give them an incentive so that they know that their full-time job is teaching, and they have to have time out to go and study. They have to have time out. Teachers must have time out to go and improve their learning and their learning skills, their teaching skills. We don't have a lot of that. Of course, I would like to see the new government concentrate on the fulfillment of the plan to bring fiber optic, to be able to have not only distribution of computers or notepads, but to be able to have fast and improved quality in communication. The connectivity has to be improved. And therefore the fiber optic, on which $3 million, which I understand the President's son is heading that project, to bring it from Brazil. It has been stillborn. Nobody knows where that is going, or if it's still alive. We don't know where the wires, the cables are buried. So you need to talk about IT in a meaningful way. You need to develop centers where you can assemble computers, where you can create computers applications. You could teach people to do that here. You could have schools, special learning. There are many kids who can take part in the special skills to write stories for internet, to write stories for television, to produce television programs, documentaries. We should have money set aside from all the revenues garnered from television, the revenues from selling licenses and so on, should come into a pool where a young person, a young woman, or a young man who wants to become a producer of documentary or short films can go and apply and get money, a grant to do that. We need to, as I said earlier, to create not only the avenues of training, because the training is going to be useless unless you have opportunities for employment. So in the education sector, I believe that you need to have a comprehensive reform. You need to have an education policy that is relevant to the needs of our youths, and the relevant training that can give them employment, and not just educated, jobless people. And as I said, the one dealing with simultaneously, we should be able to teach at least 2 other languages, 3, in fact, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. You go to Suriname and an average person speaks about 3 languages there. And here we are not able to communicate with our neighbors. Education, language training, of course, also open doors, opportunities for you to access jobs elsewhere if you can't find jobs in Guyana. And so education is going to play a pivotal role in training the young people. There are a lot of areas like the interior where you don't have trained teachers. You don't have passes in secondary school exams. They're on the very low level because there is no incentive to encourage a teacher to go into the interior. You're supposed to have duty-free. People are coming here to do all manner of things, and they're giving duty-free concessions. But our teachers are the ones who don't have an incentive even to buy a motorcycle if they decide to go into the interior, or what they call these things, the APV or something like that, to move around in the interior. So that you have to look at the human capital, because Guyana cannot develop only with talking about gold, sugar, rice, bauxite, timber. You have to talk about the human capital, and it is the human capital who will have to be trained and given relevant skill to take the country forward. So young people, I believe, have to be assured that a new government will take this task of reformulating the education priorities very seriously and to move the country forward.
Excellent. I know in the power sharing apparatus between the APNU and the AFC, I believe AFC minister will have responsibility for home affairs, which brings us to the question of safety. How do we protect our citizens? How do we dawn a new day where that is concerned? Every day you open the papers and somebody's murdered in our country, somebody is shot, somebody's gunned down. How do we change that post 11th of May 2015?
The crime scenario in Guyana is a very complex situation. You will have to deal with issues of deportation, the issues of drugs, issue of narco trafficking, issues of money laundering, white-collar crime, the other white-collar crime of thieving in government ministries, corruption involving contractors and government officials, high-time embezzlement, and even a minister of the government accessing $4.5 billion without the approval and permission of the parliament. So what I'm trying to say is that you cannot look at crime simply at the episodes of criminal activities every day. You have to look at the moral example. The country with the Jagdeo and Ramatar government, they have provided no moral example by which anyone can live. So everybody feel that life is a hustle. You got to thief to get by. And if you can't thief, you will kill to get by. And so there is a new subculture in the society that glorifies crookedness, that glorifies dishonest activities. And so if you need to deal with crime, you have to deal with it in a very comprehensive way. That first you need to bring back integrity in public life. You need to have strict adherence to the laws and to the places like Integrity Commission, where you have to declare your assets. People who hold public office should be monitored so that you know that when they came into office, how much they have, and they are not carried away by the other temptations of greed and vice, and what people say you have to greet everybody else's farm. You need to professionalize the police force. And you need to, when I say professionalize, you need to make the police force independent of political direction. The Minister of Home Affairs, right now, for example, he goes out and makes statements about the elections, that those of you who are not dead would be badly wounded. What is the Minister of National Security telling our Guyanese people? He's spreading the rhetoric of violence in the elections campaign when we should be doing the reverse to make the campaign peaceful and orderly, so that he uses language that glorifies violence. And if you subliminally think about what this minister is saying every time he opens his silly mouth, you believe that he controls law and order to an extent that if you do not obey the diktat of a ruling party or a politician, you can be punished. So there is enough institutional violence in the society that sends people berserk. And the crime that you see cannot be justified. No one should be justified invading someone's home and committing acts of violence against people. So that you have to have zero tolerance on crimes, invasion of homes. You have to have your trained units go after these criminals. And I'm going to show you David Granger and people like Kemraj Ramjatan and Nigel Hughes and Basil Williams and James Bond. I believe if we have a role in the anti-crime sector, we have leadership to it, it will be that this country cannot tolerate even drunk driving, even speeding. As I speak here, we learned about this tragic accident on the Burma Road. A teacher and 5 or 6 students have been killed. And I'm sure when you examine that, the pathology of accident, it has a lot to do with speeding, carelessness, recklessness.
Animals on the road.
Animals on the road. It has so many things that you want to feel that life doesn't matter in this country. So crime fighting has to be done from top to bottom, not really bottom up. And an element of crime fighting is that it inhibits economic activities. When bandits get into a business place, that business person is shattered. It will take them a long time to get back, and people are out of employment. When they attacked fishermen in the seas, fishermen are disabled. They cannot even make a living, much less bring fish, so that we can have access to cheap supply and plentiful supply of fish. So in a way, I believe crime fighting is a priority. But crime fighting must be integrated, not simply directed at people you see doing physical crime. You need to target them. And I hope also that there should be, as happened in the period of President Desmond Hoyt, people convicted of felony murder, people who go to rob people and commit a murder. I may have a position, and they're sentenced by a court to be hanged. I wouldn't disappoint the judge who sentenced that person. And neither would I disappoint the society who had been aggrieved by that act until we get rid of hanging as a penalty in Guyana. I would swing the rope. I can tell you, and there isn't anything more that will send a message to those who want to be criminals, not those who have been criminals, who want to be criminals, once they see that rope dangling. And I think that a new government will have to make sure that they deal seriously with this issue.
I am excited about the future for my country. I'm happy to see that we can set aside our differences, set aside the past, and work together for a better Guyana. Let's move forward together. I am excited about the future for my country.
Vote APNU AFC.
He grew up in the PPP and occasionally parted company with the political party which was almost single-handedly founded by his parents. Joey Jagan had been listed among the PPP candidates who contested the 2011 general elections. This time around, he's not in the race and he's not holding his peace. As a strong advocate of national cohesion, he told Nightly News that his latest separation from the PPP had been prompted by that party's rejection of his views regarding the gelling of minds and bodies in an inclusionary manner to advance the best interests of the people of this country.
I kept telling him to bring the opposition into the government of national unity. I believe in that. I've always advocated that, a coalition government. We don't have any national leader of any vision, really. We got able leaders, I think honorable men, but they need to come together, especially the racial and class divisions we have in this country. They need to come together and work together. Everybody needs a cut of the pie. Every nationality, every class, and every race need a cut of this pie. This Guyanese pie that could be great for all of us. Instead of that, we have majoritarian rule, which hogs all the pie for themselves. That don't work. Nowhere in the world people are accepting that.
In light of the caustic remarks emanating from the PPP over the APNU AFC coalition, Joey Jagan told Nightly News that rather than spewing venom at the Alliance for Change, the PPP should acknowledge that party's failure to put Guyana first by not initiating a coalition when first faced with a minority status in the National Assembly in 2011.
We need cohesion and unity in this country, and that's what Dr. Jagan stood for. And let those in the PPP understand that clearly, because they're not following what he said. If Dr. Jagan was faced with a minority government and he was the president, I could assure you and guarantee to you that he would have brought the opposition into his government. And that would have been the answer, not to go to another election and prorogue parliament. That is not the answer. It's too expensive, too time consuming, and too stressful and tense for the Guyanese nation.
Joey Jagan says he's not happy about the manner in which his father's name and image are being misused by persons on the campaign trail in their apparent attempt to solicit votes.
It is nice I saw Mr. Luncheon last night on TV mention my father's name, using it as to start his campaign. But he has no ground to stand on. Dr. Luncheon has no ground to stand on in his claim of following Cheddi Jagan's legacy. None at all. Cheddi Jagan didn't believe in one man controlling the NIS and the army and the police and they're around for 22 years. He should be retired by now.
Dr. Joey Jagan is also advocating deeper involvement of religious bodies in the actual management of the state.
This is our time.
One of the questions I was thinking of when we were talking about jobs, a new government comes into office, lots of persons are fearful. Am I going to lose my work? What do you say to those persons?
Well, I will just say you should have nothing to fear. There's not going to be any vendetta in this government. You want to send a message to those wrongdoers that there will be a process of law. Any person who has pushed their hands into the cookie jar and they steal public revenues, or they have violated their oath while in office and they resorted to criminal activities, then there should be a process of investigation that will be lawful. No one would be fired willy-nilly, selected for any kind of vendetta because you belong to another political party or you belong to, you were working with X, Y, or Z. No. I believe that our government must be compassionate. At the same time, we should be firm about and resolute about what we do. But we are changing this government in order to remove from the bad stewardship of the past. Too many things have happened in the past that are wrong. The first wrong thing that has happened is that you have a political system that alienates people. 40% or more of the people who consider themselves of a different race, they don't believe that this Ramatar government is their government. They are told so every day, you know, they're reminded that we run things. If you listen to the Attorney General Nandlal, when he says we are Chatri, he's a Chatri and he runs things, he tells you that what type of caste or what type of ethnicity is preferred. When he utters that someone is going and he's going to shoot up Glenn Lal's newspaper and staff, and what comes to do, he's sending a message that you have a violent government, that this state is intolerant of anyone who has a view or an opinion that is different from that of the ruling clique. So this state has become institutionalized, a state of violence and repression and alienation. We don't want to do that. We want to take a different path. And we want to say a soft word, turn it away, wrath. We cannot answer the anger of the PPP and Ramatar and Rohi with more anger. We have to soothe the wounds of this nation. We have to heal the wounds of the nation. And how do we do that? It is by assurance that no one will come in harm's way, as this government has to take on the responsibility to look after the flock. We have to be the shepherd that tells the flock that you will not be targeted, you will not be penalized, you will not be plundered, and we want to protect the resources that the flock needs to survive. the resources of the state. So you don't want the Lumumbas and them to take away the land that belong to sugar workers. You don't want to give your friends forestry concessions that are not available to Guyanese. You don't want to give foreigners concessions in mining that are not available to local miners. We have to be able to hold the scale of justice and balance the scale of justice. And for us, if the scale is like this, it doesn't matter. That is justice. Because charity begins at home. If you appear to lean a little bit more on one side, it's because you love your people more than you love others. And that's the only way it will happen, that we have to go overboard. And James, this thing here is called the Valentine's Day Agreement. You call it the Commonsburg Agreement. But it's a Valentine's Agreement. And so from now on, we should inculcate in our young people, and Guyanese as a whole, that the war is over. The war is over. This is a time for love. This is a time to make up. This is a time. I was in Northern Ireland some years ago with the Speaker Trotman and some others. We were there in a country where they had sustained war for 50 years.
Catholics and Protestants.
People fight each other for dominance based on the religious persuasion and which religious sect you belong to. And we went there and bombs were going off and people had been fighting each other in guerrilla warfare. The Sinn Féin was an armed group, and we were invited to see what was called the Good Friday Agreement, the implementation of the Good Friday Agreement, where the guerrillas came into the government, and we met the leaders like the guy Jerry Adams and McGuinness, who were considered to be terrorists yesterday, but today they are Minister of Education, Minister of Security, and they all tried to make the agreement work. So in Guyana, we have a Valentine's Day agreement to remind people that it is possible that we could put our past behind us and we could love each other. The past is blocking our way to the future. The past is the rear view mirror of our vehicle that gets us to watch at it all the time and we don't know where we're going because we're too obsessed with what is behind us. The past is like Macbeth's wife, wants vengeance for those who killed the king. We can't always look for vengeance. We can't always look and allow the past to intrude into the present or in the future. We have to free that up. And so I believe that when you deal with people who are fearful, we have to hold up assurance, very clear assurance that I am holding up tonight, that no one would be judged because of your political affiliation. No one will be judged because of what you might have done legally in the course of your employment. Because many people are forced to do things they otherwise wouldn't want to do. And they are saying they're doing it because of the political directorate. And I say this even more and emphasize what Brigadier General retired David Crane just said when we first announced the Valentine's Day Agreement. He said that if it was wrong now for 42% to lock out 58%, it will be equally wrong if when we come into the government, we tend to, and we form the majority in the government, that we lock out the opposition. So our first hand of friendship would be extended to the PPP. We believe that the members of the PPP perhaps will vote in accordance with their conscience, as best as they could. But we still recognize that the PPP will not disappear. So we'll extend an olive branch and hands of friendship that we want to work with you because we have a common mission. We have a common purpose, and life goes on after the elections. And we also want to make sure that there is cooperation between opposition and government and consultation. And we'll go even further. We're going to open a window We will open a window for the PPP if it wants to join us in the government of national unity.
That's excellent.
We'll open a window, but as you know, if you open the window for oxygen and fresh air, you get a couple of mosquitoes and flies. So we have to, in opening a window, we have to be careful that we keep the flies and the mosquitoes.
Let me ask a question about the flies and mosquitoes. When we look at a country like Trinidad, 50 minutes plane ride from here, you spoke about swinging the noose early on. The Trinidadian Prime Minister swings the noose, holding our ministers accountable. She has a very high standard of credibility and character. The question I wanted to ask, we've seen so many infractions with our public servants, our top public servants. So let's say 1 month into office, you get a phone call, you're the Prime Minister, and you get a phone call from the top cop who says that one of your ministers has just jumped a red light, and red light test says the minister has been drinking, is inebriated. What is your response?
Well, I will tell the top cop, probably doesn't have to even be the top cop. You don't reach that far. Even the ordinary cop on the road should be able to enforce the law in spite of who the person is. So being a minister of a government doesn't make you greater than a citizen. The common denomination in any society is a citizen. We are all the same. And the law cannot be for some and not for others. And therefore, I would expect that there should be strict compliance with the law from top to bottom. And saying that also doesn't simply mean that you're holding your ministers and government officials to a higher standard. What we're trying to say is that they should feel that if they didn't set the example, others are going to flout the law with impunity. So a minister knows he can't drink and drive, or a minister knows he can't speed, then don't do those things. Look, we have to lead by example. It's a small country. And I said before that you need to have those examples younger people can live by. When I was in the government, I recall the very first few months after we got into the government, I was a minister, I was a senior minister, and my colleagues were quarreling about salary. And I took the position that I will not accept an increase in salary as a minister until nurses and teachers were paid more. It was a position that Chetty Jagan agreed with me then, and we set up a committee to investigate. Jeffrey Thomas was a minister, and Sheikh Baksh was a minister. The president appointed the two of them to examine the budget to see if there was more money that could pay. One minister told me, watched me contemptuously and said, "You don't like money or what?" So well, you don't give it to the Dharamsala. You know, and those are the examples. I have never gone out of the country and traveled first class ticket to be paid by the state. I've never been into a five-star hotel. In fact, probably never in a hotel. When I travel abroad, I stay at relatives because I don't want the state to pay. When I became a minister, I didn't leave my house. I stayed and lived in my own house. I see many of my colleagues try to find fancy places and I never had an air-conditioned unit for many years, even as a minister. Not even as a minister, when I was a minister. So there are things that you do when you're in public life that you have to set the example. And I'm not saying that a minister should suffer because he chose to be a minister. No. If you need a decent salary to live, don't bring down the salary because you force the minister to take bribe. You will keep them in a position where they are insensitivized and where they have a kind of an impetus to work. But you don't make them suffer because you're a minister. The president of Uruguay, for example, he wears slippers.
Still has an old car.
He has an old car. He used to ride a bicycle to work. He takes his
Worst
salary.
president.
He takes his salary and he gives it to the poor. I mean, you can do those things symbolically, but that's not going to cure the society of its ills. What you have to do is to reform the society, change the culture of how business is done, change the culture of public life, and then I believe you don't have the need to have Kamala Bissessar. Kamala Bissessar is doing a good job in Trinidad, but we should have our leadership should be doing what she has done so successfully. She tells the public, I am intolerant of anyone in my cabinet, in my home, who violates the law. If she had an Anil and Lal to deal with, she would have fired him 10 times. If she had an Ashni Singh to deal with, she would have fired him a dozen times. If she had several of those miscreant ministers who commit blunders and are inefficient, like Clement Rohi as Minister of Home Affairs, she would have fired him several times again. So the question is that you don't need to look what others are doing outside. You have to look at what standard you expect. And if my leader, my president, is wallowing in a cesspool of inefficiency, incompetence, and mediocrity, then that doesn't reflect on these ministers. It reflects on my leader, because that's a standard that he finds comfortable.
Excellent. James, you had a question?
Mr. Nagamoto, we have to confront, and you dealt with it briefly, but we have to confront racism in this country. I know APNU, AFC have stated publicly that one of the issues that they will deal with, some of the issues are constitutional reform, the finance legislation, good governance, youth. They've made some focus on that. But what importantly they've also set out is that they will focus on national reconciliation. For my part, I believe that this coalition, this alliance, is the genesis of a new movement of racial integration. But we must first confront racism, as APNU and AFC have said. We'll deal with national unity and national reconstruction, reconciliation. What are your views on racism now, and whether we know it poses a challenge, but how much of a challenge does it pose to the APNU AFC coalition? Racism of itself.
James, racism is a disease. It's a social disease. In our society, it is not evident in the street corners where people have normal daily intercourse. It is something that is exploited. It is something that you use for mobilization. It is something that you use for identity. So that we have to start dealing with the issue of racism at the level of the political leadership, that they must not resort to appeal to racism. Racism is just the base instinct. It's when you fall out of any other reaction to something, you go to the very last level of your human reaction and you find some comfort in ethnicity. So you clothe yourself in who you are and you find that that's a defense mechanism. But it's not always offensive. There are people of different ethnicities who live comfortably, as we have lived, where when I grew up, I was a little boy selling fish in a basket on my head with my mother, and then sometime I will sit on the jackass cart and I will blow the shell to go into the African villages. And on Sundays I go with my exercise book and I will collect the money. So I had an experience where I will call, I know Auntie Mary, I know Uncle Joe, I know they're Afro-Guyanese. They all call my mother Auntie Chuno. Auntie Chuno. We didn't know ethnic hostility or ethnic suspicions and so on, because we grew up that way. So therefore, you can learn to grow differently, all right? Because if you have some bandit attacking your house, and you're calling for police to come. You don't call if you're an Indian, you don't call and said, I want a brown clothes police to come. You don't mind if the police is black clothes, brown clothes, or blue clothes. You want a policeman that can come and protect you right now. When you have some rats in your house, you don't look whether the cat is white or black. You're looking for a cat that can catch rats. And in this country, you have a lot of rats. And therefore, we can't just see ethnicity as the answer to the problem. We have to see human efficiency, human qualities, what you are, the best of the human side. And that's what we have to emphasize. And we must take this positive message, because I can tell you this, and I am saying this with some reservation, because I didn't want to introduce a type of discourse that lowers the level of our of the dialogue, the conversation. We want a new conversation, but I can not end by saying, how hypocritical are these people from the PPP, who every day they're saying how Moses Nagamutu joined up the black man, you know, as if an APNU black man is different from Lumumba, or Sam Hines, or Roger Luncheon, or Clement Rohi, or Jennifer Webster, or Jennifer Westford, or Kwame McCoy, the McCoy. How is a black man that Moses is now associated with any different from Robeson Ben? You know? And he's a handsome man, I can tell you. How is he different from Joe Hamilton, who went and testified before a commission that I was a member of the House of Israel and I was trained to kill everybody else if that was the instruction, except Cherry Jagan and UC Kwayana? How do you find it so convenient and comfortable to invite those people into your house, into your chambers, into your bedroom, and you are not uncomfortable with black man, but Nagamutu sold out? You see? So there's a hypocrisy,
no logic in
this.
No
and
logic.
No one must buy this at all. And then when they try to say how they don't want a coalition, you have to see the PPP historically as trying to evolve this coalition. Perhaps unwittingly so, they chose who they want to collate with. United Force. Mansour Nadir came out of United Force. He's in the PPP. And the United Force, the PPP will tell you from their historical record, is what was responsible for putting the PPP in 28 years in the political wilderness. Yeah. Right?
64.
But it's okay to bring Mansour Nadir. Then you bring Leslie Ramsamy, who came here with a party called Republican Party. He came to destroy the PPP. Said the PPP was a communist party. Ramsamy is in the bosom of the PPP. Ramsamy conspired with them. We all know the story of computers and
Roger Carver.
Yeah. You chose to have in your cabinet Nanda Kishore Gopal. I recall writing a story for the Mirror newspaper where Gopal built an image of Cherry Jagan and burnt it in Success Village on the East Coast. Gopal, when we were discussing whether Cherry Jagan should be the presidential candidate of the Patriotic Coalition for Democracy, said, no, I don't want him. He chose somebody else. Cherry, to his credit, said, if you don't want me because I'm an Indian, Gopal, I'm going to give you Dr. Roger Luncheon. And that's when they said Luncheon was black, but he was red. Maybe he was communist. But Gopal today is in the PPP. But he's from another party. He had formed the Guyana Labour Party. And they put him to head the Gaisuko, and he broke up Gaisuko, and then put him to be Labour Minister. So when you tell me is that coalition is bad, and you collate with the forces who headed political party that was out to destroy you, then you're not serious about denouncing anyone who formed coalition. It is only because you collated with birds of a feather, with those you find that you could collate with, and you want to exclude others with who may probably have a higher standard. So for me, I believe I can always understand the reason for coalition. Every process in Guyana historically has been a search for coalition. And we have never, when bauxite workers marched from Linden and came on the coast on one occasion, they came to give solidarity to sugar workers. In history, they had a march of Afro-Guyanese into Ramveld to give support to protesting sugar workers who were shot also in Ramveld. Historically, you have always had this impetus of our people to break out of the cocoon that kept us locked in, to come out of that cocoon, to come out of our imprisonment, and to identify with others across the ethnic divide. And so I find that the APNU AFC has now set symbolically, it has set the stage for a rapprochement of a national level, and I would hope one day that I will see a day of national embrace where we can hold each other, embrace each other in true brothership, in true fraternity as Guyanese, and not that we are different races.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're out of time. We know you guys will have enjoyed this program. We really want to thank our special guest, Mr. Moses Nagamutu, the prime ministerial candidate for the coalition. And we hope to see you back next week. Thank you to our panelists. It was lovely having you guys again. And see you guys same time, same place, very soon.
Tell them